Welcome to AudioCert, where the official study guides are brought to life. Hello, and welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a really fascinating journey into the world of digital forensics. We're zeroing in on the EC Council Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator, or CHFI certification. That's the 31249 series. It's a critical area, especially in our hyper-connected world, and I'm genuinely excited to have you join us as we untangle some core concepts.
It's great to be here. Yeah, the CHFI certification, it's all about arming individuals with the knowledge and, importantly, the practical skills they need to investigate cybercrimes. That means everything from, spotting system vulnerabilities before they're exploited, right through to meticulously recovering crucial digital evidence after an incident has happened. It's incredibly relevant because, let's face it, in our digital lives today, almost every crime, whether it's financial fraud or something maybe more sinister, it leaves behind a trail of electronic breadcrumbs. Understanding how to track those, find them, analyze them, it's absolutely paramount for justice these days.
That's spot on. And our deep dive today takes us into Chapter 12, PDA, Blackberry, and iPod Forensics. Now, when we think of forensic investigation, our minds often jump straight to desktop computers, right? Or maybe massive servers, complex network logs. But what about those devices we used to carry, or maybe some still do carry in our pockets every single day? These personal mobile devices present a truly unique and, frankly, quite a thrilling challenge for an investigator.
You've hit on a critical distinction there. While, yes, many of the foundational forensic techniques we use for larger systems still apply, these mobile devices like personal digital assistants, PDAs, Blackberries, even iPods, they have distinct characteristics that really demand a much more tailored investigative approach. I mean, think about it. Their sheer portability, they're always on nature sometimes, and often specialized, maybe even proprietary operating systems. You just can't treat them like a miniature hard drive. Each one is like a mini computer in its own right, and they often contain this vault of personal, transactional, and contextual data. For an investigator, this is a potential goldmine of evidence, absolutely crucial for pretty much any modern case.
Right, so our mission for you, the learner, today is to gain a quick yet really thorough understanding of how to approach these challenging but incredibly rich sources of digital evidence. We're going to try and ensure no critical details overlooked, leave no digital stone unturned. Get ready for some real aha moments, I think, as we connect these seemingly disparate device types and maybe reveal the underlying forensic principles that tie them together. #TechCagMoliIRLs. Understanding PDAs and their forensics. Okay, let's kick things off by rolling back the clock a bit. So what exactly was a personal digital assistant, a PDA, and why were they such a big deal? Essentially paving the way for our modern smartphones, weren't they?
Oh, a PDA was a true marvel of its time, really. Imagine, if you will, a handheld computing device that somehow seamlessly combined computing power with telephone, fax, and even those early kind of clunky internet functions. They were designed to be incredibly portable, always with you, and almost always boasted some form of networking or connectivity. In their prime, they rapidly evolved into these incredibly powerful mini computers. They could function as a cell phone, a fax sender, a web browser, and of course, a personal organizer. They stored and transmitted just a sheer volume and variety of data that was unprecedented for something that size. Honestly, you can think of them as the direct ancestors of today's smartphones. They really laid the groundwork for the multifunctional, always connected devices that we absolutely can't live without now.
And that multifunctionality and constant connectivity immediately screams potential evidence source, doesn't it? It's just like our smartphones today.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really the core connection for our listeners right here. Because PDAs were so versatile and connected, they became these incredibly rich repositories of potential evidence. We're talking everything from call logs and contact lists to emails, browsing history, maybe even GPS data, depending on the model. This historical context is super vital because the forensic headaches they presented, well, those are often eerily similar to the challenges we face with devices today. It's a direct lineage of digital evidence. ####B. Components of a PDA.
Okay, so if they're like mini computers, what are the core components inside that an investigator really needs to be aware of? What's under the hood, so to speak?
Right, under the hood. Well, the key components are pretty similar to a PC, just, smaller. You got the microprocessor of the brain, though obviously restricted by size. Then there are input devices, often touch screens or tiny keyboards. And critically, the operating system, the OS, that runs all the software. Understanding these basic components is fundamental for forensic analysis because it dictates exactly how data is stored, where it's stored, and how you can access it.
Okay, so that's the hardware. But for an investigator in the field, what's the single biggest insight you gain from understanding these core internal components beyond just knowing what they are?
It's all about predictive power, really. Think of it this way. Knowing the operating system, for instance, isn't just a detail. It's your immediate roadmap to the device's soul, you could say. It tells you exactly where the call logs will likely be stored, how emails are filed, and what kind of file system structures you're going to encounter. Without that fundamental understanding, without knowing about its microprocessor, input devices like touch screens, and that underlying OS, you're essentially, well, fumbling in the dark, losing precious time, and potentially missing critical evidence. Each component dictates how data lives on that device. ######, general PDA forensics concepts.
That makes perfect sense. So with these unique characteristics, is doing forensics on a PDA just like doing it on a desktop? Or are there special considerations we absolutely need to keep in mind? I'm thinking about how easily a small device can just run out of juice, for instance.
You're touching on a key area there. While the core procedures are indeed similar to traditional computer forensics, there are definitely notable differences, as the source material puts it, that an investigator must be acutely aware of.
Wow.
Mobile devices being so portable and often always on, along with sometimes having proprietary systems, they demand specific methodologies to avoid data loss or alteration. For instance, volatile data, that's information like active network connections, running processes, or clipboard contents that simply disappears when power is lost or the device is turned off, is a much bigger concern with a device that can easily run out of battery or be accidentally dropped and reset.
Right.
This immediately makes me think, how often do investigators discover devices that are already dead, and what kind of crucial volatile data is lost in that moment? This raises an important question. What specific steps ensure evidence integrity on these unique devices, especially when they're so prone to changes? ###D. Investigative methods of PDA forensics. The 4 main steps.
So the unique characteristics of PDAs clearly demand a very careful and specific approach to prevent data loss. That brings us to the actual process of investigation. Our source material outlines a 4-step framework for PDA forensics. Can you walk us through those steps? And I think you mentioned there are critical pre-steps too.
Absolutely. Before we even hit those 4 main steps, examination, identification, collection, and documentation, there's a critical pre-step, securing the evidence. And this isn't just a best practice. It requires a legally approved process to ensure admissibility in court. You need to seize not just the PDA itself, but also its docking cradle and all external memory cards. This last part is particularly tricky.
Why is that?
Well, because with the tiny size and ever-increasing capacities of modern memory cards, missing even one could mean missing an extensive amount of potential evidence. Think of it. A tiny microSD card could hold gigabytes of data. Once secured, the absolute next action is to create an exact bit-for-bit image of the device's storage. This is like digitally preserving the crime scene at that precise moment before any further examination begins.
Okay, got it. Preserve the scene digitally first. Then what are the 4 steps?
Right. So the 4 core steps. Step 1, examination. This is about understanding all potential sources of evidence. It's not just the PDA itself. You need to consider the device's cradle, its power supply, any other peripherals like styluses or keyboards, and critically, any other computers or devices that might have synchronized with the PDA. The goal is to cast a wide net.
Look beyond the PDA itself. Makes sense.
Step 2, identification. Here, you precisely identify the specific type of device and, crucially, its operating system or systems. It's not uncommon for a device to be capable of running 2 different OSs, so you need to be thorough. Several interfaces can help. The cradle interface, the manufacturer's serial number, the specific cradle type, even details on the power supply. This tells you what data structures, file systems, and potential vulnerabilities to expect.
Knowing the OS is key.
Okay. Step 3, collection. This step is where you gather data from all memory devices. Internal memory plus external storage like SD cards, multimedia cards, MMCs, micro drives, USB tokens. These can vary wildly in capacity, so never assume anything. You also need to collect all associated power leads, cables, and cradles. Critically, you must prioritize capturing volatile information.
That data disappears, right?
Exactly. Data that won't survive a power off or reset active connections, running programs, temporary cache files. It needs to be captured immediately. Once everything is captured in image, the PDA must be bagged and, crucially, kept constantly charged.
Constantly charged. Why?
To maintain its state and prevent any further data loss or changes until analysis is complete. Step 4, documentation. Like any forensic process, meticulous documentation and maintaining the chain of custody are paramount. Record all visible data, case number, date, time, photograph everything in the area, connected devices, multiple angles, generate a detailed report describing the process, the device's state, store it all securely.
It truly underscores how thin the margin for error is in this field. Every single piece of information, every step can be questioned, right? So absolute precision is non-negotiable. What stands out to you about how meticulous this needs to be?
Well, the biggest challenge is always the human element, the potential for error under pressure,
Yeah.
When you're dealing with volatile evidence, the clock is ticking. You have to be systematic, you have to be fast, and you have to be right, all while maintaining that unimpeachable chain of custody. It's like performing, I don't know, delicate surgery in a fast-moving, high-stakes environment. Hashtag, tag, EPDA investigative tips.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for anyone on the ground. What if you encounter a PDA in different states, maybe it's powered on, maybe off, in a cradle, not in a cradle? Are there specific immediate actions an investigator should take, like a first aid protocol?
Absolutely. The device's initial state dictates your first critical move. It's your forensic first aid, essentially. Device switched on. If the PDA is on, act immediately. Priority 1, provide constant power. This is crucial to preserve any volatile information, which, as we said, could be essential and will be lost if the battery dies. Connect it to external power without interacting further.
Okay, keep it alive.
Device switched off. If it's off, leave it off initially. Then carefully switch it on, take a photo of it in its on state, especially what's on the screen, and record its current battery charge. This documents its initial condition without risking data changes before imaging.
Got it. Don't just leave it off.
Device in its cradle.
Yeah.
You need to avoid any further communication. Disconnect it from the PC, but here's a serious warning. A sophisticated suspect might have set up a tripwire.
A tripwire, like a self-destruct.
Exactly like that. It could be a script that activates upon disconnection, maybe erasing potential evidence. Despite this risk, you must disconnect it to proceed, but you need to carefully note the state and any unusual behavior.
Wow, high stakes.
Device, not in its cradle. This is a bit simpler. No tripwire danger from the cradle itself. You just seize the PDA, the cradle if it's nearby, and any associated cords. Wireless connection. If wireless is active, again, avoid communication. Immediately eliminate wireless activity by placing the device into an anti-static isolating envelope, often called a Faraday bag. Blocks signals, protects against static discharge.
Faraday bag.
Expansion card and slot. Don't remove components or open the device. No taking out cards or peripherals. Seize the whole sleeve or casing and all related peripherals and media cards together just as you found them.
That tripwire analogy really paints a vivid picture, almost like defusing a bomb in the field. It's truly a high-stakes scenario. What's the psychological impact, I wonder, on an investigator knowing that their first move could inadvertently destroy crucial evidence?
It creates an intense pressure, no doubt about it. Every action has to be premeditated, every possibility considered. It's why training and systematic procedure are so vital. They provide that framework of confidence in a volatile situation. You rely on your training. Hashtag, tag, F, LGH. Deploying PDA forensic tools.
With all these complexities, there must be specialized tools to help investigators navigate PDA forensics, right? Yeah. What are some of the key forensic tools that aid in this challenging process?
You're right. Specialized tools are absolutely crucial. Now, we might have fewer dedicated tools just for handhelds compared to traditional computer forensics, but the ones available are quite powerful and designed specifically for these challenges. There's PDA Secure. This is interesting because it's both a security solution and a forensic tool. It offers things like enhanced password protection, encryption, locking, wiping. But from an investigative angle, it's significant because it provides administrative controls. It allows monitoring of network login traffic, infrared transmissions, even application usage based on time and date. That can reveal patterns of illicit behavior or unauthorized data transfer.
So it helps see what the device was doing.
Exactly. Then there's PDA Seizure. As the name suggests, this is really focused on acquiring and analyzing PDA data. It works in Windows, acquires data, lets you view it, report on it. It can extract data from both RAM for that volatile info and ROM. It's got an easy GUI, supports platforms like Pocket PC, Palm OS, does forensic imaging, data searching, hashing for integrity, bookmarking. Pretty comprehensive for PDAs.
And what about more general tools?
Well, EnCase is a big one. It's one of the most popular commercial forensic tools overall. It's known for being robust across desktop, servers, and mobile devices. EnCase can acquire info and evidence from PDAs, and its powerful suite lets investigators conduct complex investigations efficiently and accurately. Its strength is handling diverse data types and file systems in one platform.
It's clear that these tools don't just simplify things. They provide the specialized access and integrity checks needed for such volatile evidence. They streamline a potentially overwhelming task.
Exactly. They're indispensable for turning a complex, error-prone process into something forensically sound and admissible in court. But again, they still need a skilled forensic examiner to operate them correctly and interpret what they find, connecting the technical bits back to the actual case. #tag 2. Deep dive into Blackberry forensics.
That was a truly meticulous look at PDAs, which,
Right.
as you said, were the mini computers that started it all. Now let's fast forward a bit to a device that really defined business communication for a generation, the BlackBerry. For many, it was their first always connected device. What made BlackBerries so unique from a forensic perspective, especially compared to the PDAs we just discussed?
The BlackBerry. Also known, of course, as a RIM device for research in motion. It was distinct precisely because of that always-on nature and its ingenious use of wireless push technology.
Push technology, that was the big thing, wasn't it?
That was the game changer. Unlike many PDAs that needed regular desktop syncing, BlackBerries were constantly connected, continuously receiving info wirelessly almost instantly. This adds a different dimension to forensics, as our source puts it. It means data could be updated, received, or even overwritten at any moment without the user doing anything. Interestingly, this very portability, the fact it's always with the user and always connected, can actually be the investigator's greatest ally in tracing activity and establishing precise timelines. #B operating system of the BlackBerry.
That always-on push technology is certainly a significant differentiator. So what specific features did the BlackBerry operating system OS offer that would be of particular interest to an investigator, maybe revealing crucial data points?
Yeah, the BlackBerry OS had several capabilities that forensic examiners would find incredibly valuable. For instance, over-the-air OTA activation. The device could be activated and configured remotely. That could be relevant if a device was quickly wiped and re-provisioned, maybe. It also seamlessly synchronized contacts and appointments directly with Microsoft Outlook, making it a hub for personal and business communications, a really rich source of schedules and connections. A particularly interesting feature was the Password Keeper program. This was designed to securely store sensitive info like banking passwords, PINs. If legitimate access was gained, this could unlock a real treasure trove of sensitive credentials.
Wow.
And finally, the ability to customize the display data also meant information could be arranged or potentially hidden in ways that might be forensically significant. All these features point to rich potential evidence sources, who someone talked to, what sensitive info they stored, their schedules, #see BlackBerry operation and security capabilities.
BlackBerries were renowned for their security. That was a huge selling point. How exactly did they achieve this robust security, and what does that mean for an investigator trying to access data from one?
You're absolutely right. Security was a cornerstone. They had an integrated wireless modem communicating over networks like the Bell South Intelligent Wireless Network. For backups, restores, syncing, they used the BlackBerry serial protocol, simple packets, efficient exchange. Now, wireless security was strong. They used robust encryption, triple DES, and importantly, AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. AES was a more secure option, safeguarding confidentiality and authenticity, especially for data in transit between the server and device.
So data moving back and forth was protected.
Exactly. And we mentioned the Password Keeper. Its stored entries were specifically protected by AES encryption. Very hard to crack without the master password. For stored data security, BlackBerry allowed mandatory password authentication, often enforced via customizable IT policies on the BlackBerry Enterprise Server, BES. A key point here, vital for forensics, was that no spaging of data occurred between the server and device where data was decrypted, meaning data remained encrypted end-to-end, server to device. This enhanced security significantly. For an investigator, this presents both a challenge to the encryption itself, but also potentially a clear pathway for forensic access, because decryption often relied on policies or keys managed by the BES, especially if it was a corporate device.
It's fascinating how security was built in from the ground up, not just for user protection, but also, paradoxically, by leaving a clear, auditable trail for authorized forensic access, if you know where to look and how to get those decryption keys right.
Precisely. The stronger the security, often the more robust the evidence, provided you have the legitimate means and expertise to access it. It's a kind of double-edged sword that skilled investigators learn to wield. #D forensic examination of a BlackBerry.
Given that always-on push messaging nature, What's the immediate most critical concern for an investigator when seizing a BlackBerry? It feels like time is of the absolute essence.
Time is of the absolute essence,
Good.
yeah. The immediate overwhelming concern is that incoming pushed information can and likely will overwrite previously deleted data at any moment. And this problem is compounded by background apps that might also be constantly receiving info and altering the file system. So the first, most crucial step is to eliminate the device's ability to receive data push.
How do you do that?
Well, you could try turning off the radio, but a much better solution is to immediately get the device to an area with no signal, think Faraday bag again, or even just inside a metal filing cabinet drawer, anything to block the signal. And here's a critical warning that often gets overlooked. Simply turning a BlackBerry off using the power button is a serious mistake.
Why is that?
Because a BlackBerry isn't truly off unless power is completely removed for an extended period, or it's put in a special storage mode. If you just turn it off, any queued items waiting to be pushed could flood in upon reboot, potentially overwriting valuable data. Even worse, powering off could inadvertently trigger some program allowing remote commands via email, potentially wiping data or altering its state remotely.
That's terrifying from an evidence perspective.
It is. So quickly on acquisition considerations. Device off. If you seize it and it's off, take it to a shielded location before turning it on. Weak signal area if no shielded spot. Device on. If it's on, immediately take it to a secure, shielded location and disable or turn off the radio before examining.
Okay, and what about passwords?
Right. Password-protected devices. It's vital to know the plaintext password itself is not stored. Instead, a hashing of the password is stored. A hash is like a unique digital fingerprint generated from the password. It's irreversible. You can't get the original password back from the hash, but it lets the device verify a password attempt without storing the vulnerable original, similar to most operating systems.
Okay, so you can't just grab the password file.
Correct. Now, for evidence collection, this is where BlackBerries famously require a departure from traditional forensic methods. You must record logs kept on the unit before you take an image.
Before. Why?
Because these specific logs are often wiped after imaging the device. It's counterintuitive, but absolutely necessary. Key log files include radio status, state of the radio functions, was it connected, roam and radio. Buffer of up to 16 entries, tower and channel info, crucial for location, connectivity analysis, but won't survive a reset. Transmit receive. Gateway info, type and size of data transmitted, paints a picture of network activity. Profile string. Details of negotiation with the last used radio tower, more location and network history.
So you grab these logs first.
You'd review these using unit control functions. Things like Mobitext to radio status, device status, gives insights into memory, ports, file system health, even something called CPU watch puppy information.
CPU watch puppy.
Yeah, it's essentially a diagnostic monitor that flags unusual CPU activity or performance issues. Anomalies there could indicate tampering, which is obviously a huge red flag for an investigator.
Makes sense. Then imaging.
Right. Imaging and profiling involves extracting those crucial logs from a developed image and then acquiring a bit-by-bit backup image using the Blackberry Software Development Kit, SDK, which used to be available from BlackBerry.com. The SDK utility dumps the flash RAM contents into a file for examination with a hex editor or other tools. The SDK's simulator can also help match the network and model, which is useful context, ###E, attacking the BlackBerry.
Okay, flipping the coin now. What about methods for attacking BlackBerries? What tools or techniques existed that could compromise these devices? Things investigators would need to understand to identify a breach.
Understanding attack vectors is absolutely crucial, yeah, for both defense and investigation. Several methods existed. One notable set was the BlackBerry Attack Toolkit, which, used with BB proxy software, could exploit website vulnerabilities the BlackBerry might interact with. Another technique was an attack vector, basically a method to trick users into downloading malicious software onto their device, social engineering them into installing malware. And finally, hijacks, often called blackjacks. These allowed an attacker to take over a legitimate user's BlackBerry, effectively replacing them on the network, maybe intercepting communications or using it maliciously.
So understanding these attack vectors isn't just about playing offense. It's absolutely crucial for understanding how to defend against such attacks and, just as importantly, how to investigate them once they've occurred, to figure out how they got in.
Exactly. Knowing how a device can be compromised is the first step in understanding how to secure it and, when needed, how to find the digital evidence of that breach, including identifying the specific tools and techniques the attacker used. ###SVEN. Securing the BlackBerry.
So on the flip side of attacks, How could individuals or organizations secure their BlackBerry devices to protect information from these very attacks we just talked about?
Right, security measures. Several key things could be done. Regularly cleaning BlackBerry memory to remove residual data was one. Protecting stored messages on the messaging server itself. Server-side security is key. It was also vital to encrypt application passwords and ensure their secure storage on the device. Organizations could implement strict IT policies to limit password authentication attempts, say, max 10 tries before locking or wiping the device. And as we've mentioned, using AES technology for the password keeper provided exceptionally strong protection for sensitive entries stored there. These were all layers of defense. #G BlackBerry Signing Authority Tool.
You mentioned the BlackBerry Signing Authority tool earlier. What's its specific role, and how does it contribute to the overall security?
Right, the Signing Authority tool. It plays a very specific and important role in the BlackBerry ecosystem. Essentially, it helps developers protect their data and intellectual property when creating applications. More broadly, it allows them to manage access to sensitive application program interfaces, or APIs. It uses a system of public and private signature keys with asymmetric cryptography to validate authenticity. In essence, it ensures only authorized apps or trusted developers can access certain core functionalities or exchange API info securely. It prevents malicious code from easily gaining unauthorized access to the device's core functions. #HHHJ information hiding in a BlackBerry.
Beyond standard storage, where there's specific places where information might be deliberately hidden on a BlackBerry, like a digital dead drop.
Yes, absolutely. There were several techniques. One could, for instance, create hidden databases that wouldn't show up through the normal user interface. But perhaps more cleverly, information could be tucked away in partition gaps. These are essentially the unused, unallocated spaces that naturally occur between major sections of the storage, like between the OS area and where user files typically sit. Because these gaps aren't part of any actively mapped partition, they're often overlooked by standard tools. This makes them attractive for clandestine storage by someone trying to conceal data, making it harder for an investigator to find. #3, uncovering iPod forensics.
Okay, now let's talk about the iPod, a device most people just associate purely with music, right? But what makes it a relevant target for forensic analysis? It feels a little less obvious than a PDA or a BlackBerry, doesn't it?
That's a common perception, yeah. But it's important to remember that despite being digital media players, iPods also doubled as highly capable, portable storage devices. Just big USB drives, essentially. Their immense popularity, everyone seemed to have one, meant their forensic analysis became increasingly common. So much so that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, developed specific guidelines for PDA forensics that apply here too. The key is to treat an iPod as you would treat any other suspect hard drive, with all the respect and care it deserves. Remember, at its core, it is a piece of digital evidence. Its primary function might be entertainment, but its underlying hardware is data storage, and that's what makes it forensically valuable. #B, the iPod family.
The iPod wasn't just one device, though. It evolved through several generations and models. What were the key iterations, and why is knowing the specific model or generation important for an investigator?
Understanding the iPod family is crucial because different models had different storage types and connection methods, which directly impacts how you approach the forensic acquisition. The main iPod line went through 5 key generations. First gen, 2001, FireWire connection, physical scroll wheel. Second gen, bigger hard drives, touch-sensitive wheel. Third gen, touch buttons, dot connector, FireWire primary, USB for sync. Fourth gen, added photo viewing, color display, FireWire USB. Fifth gen, video playback, brighter display, search, longer video battery, and importantly, USB only for data sync, FireWire just for charging.
USB only for the later ones, okay.
Right. Then you have the other models. iPod mini, slimmer, 46 GBB HDD, USB FireWire, scroll wheel with buttons. iPod nano, big difference here, use flash memory storage, mostly USB for data, FireWire just for charging. iPod shuffle, also flash memory, simple USB connection, later models used a dock. So knowing the model and generation tells the investigator the storage type. Is it a spinning hard disk drive, HDD, or solid state flash memory? This impacts imaging methods, speed, even potential recovery techniques. It also tells them which connections, FireWire, USB, might be relevant so they have the right cables and adapters ready. #See by iPod features.
Beyond just playing music, what file types and other functions did iPod support? And what are the forensic implications of these capabilities for an investigation?
iPod supported a range of media formats: audio, protected AAC, AIFE, MP3, WAV, M4 AAC, LC, Apple lossless, video from 5th Gen, .m4v.mp4 using MPEG-4 H.264 AVC. Interestingly, iTunes could also translate uncopy-protected Windows media audio, WMA files for playback, though not protected ones. Formats like MIDI, OGVorbis, FLAC weren't natively supported, though iTunes could translate MIDI.
What about copy protection?
Yes. iTunes was specifically designed not to transfer songs from an iPod back to a computer due to copyright concerns. But it's worth noting, third-party circumvention products did exist to bypass this, which could be forensically relevant if you're looking for unauthorized copying. iPods also had a limited PDA functionality. Mac users could sync schedules contacts via iSync. From iTunes 5.0, Windows users could sync with Outlook Express. Mozilla calendar files could even be manually copied. From a forensic perspective, while these functions were limited for direct user interaction on the iPod itself, they absolutely made it possible to capture calendar entries and contact lists as data stored on the device. This means valuable time-stamped events, associated people, crucial schedules could be recovered, makes a seemingly simple music player a potentially rich source of intelligence. #D, the iPod as an operating system.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Most people don't think of an iPod as a computer, but it could actually run as a small portable system. Tell us about iPod Linux. It sounds like something an attacker might have found particularly appealing.
This is a fascinating aspect, yeah, and one an investigator absolutely needs to be aware of. iPod Linux was a BT Linux-based Linux distribution, basically a custom Linux kernel designed to run on various iPod models. One of its main components was Podzilla, and Podzilla 2, which gave it an iPod-like interface, but added things like video playback with sound, support for more music formats like OGG. Under iPod Linux, audio recording was even said to be higher quality than Apple's native firmware. It also supported games Doom, Doom 2, even Game Boy emulation.
And you could run Linux on your iPod.
Exactly. Underlying this was UClinux, microcontroller Linux, optimized for devices without a memory management unit. It supported newer kernels, compilers like standard C++ byte. Crucially, an attacker could create and compile middleware or some other code of interest, their own custom software for storage and execution on the iPod when running UClinux. This effectively transformed a simple music player into a potential covert computing platform capable of laying custom, potentially malicious code. Imagine the implications for hiding information or sneaking data out. #E. Drive formats, Apple HFS Plus or FAT32.
Just like any computer drive, the iPod had a file system. What were the main types, and how does that impact an investigation?
Right. The drive format used by an iPod's hard drive primarily depended on the initial synchronization host. If it was first synced with a Mac, it would likely be formatted with Apple HFS Plus would. If initially connected to a Windows host, it would use the FAT32 file system. Knowing this is incredibly helpful. It immediately tells an investigator what tools they'll need. HFS Plus requires different tools than FAT32, and what data structures to expect. It also helps match the iPod to its original host computer, providing valuable historical context. Interestingly, iPods used a wear leveling technique, especially relevant for flash memory, but also some HDDs. Data was written sequentially, beginning to end before looping back. This makes overwriting specific files less likely, which is actually a valuable feature for forensic analysts, as it increases the chances of recovering deleted data.
You prefer HFS Plus?
From a purely forensic perspective, yes. HFS Plus generally maintains more expensive file ownership and metadata compared to FAT32, which can be useful. However, HFS Plus formatted iPods were less common overall, as Windows was more prevalent. #F, the iPod system partition.
What kind of information resided in the iPod system partition? Is there any user-identifiable data stored there in a normal native iPod setup?
In a native iPod, one without modifications like iPod Linux, the system partition contains no user-identifiable data. It's purely for the device's core functions. It holds the embedded OS, operational images like the Apple logo, do not disconnect screen, system fonts, built-in games, other preloaded apps essential for basic function. It's like the operating system's private space.
But what if iPod Linux was installed?
That changes things significantly. In that scenario, user data might exist where you wouldn't expect it. iPod Linux actually modifies the bootloader, which resides in the system partition. This modification changes the partition's hash value and enables dual booting. While iPod Linux's main system files are usually in the data partition, that bootloader modification directly impacts the system partition. So if iPod Linux is suspected, the system partition itself becomes a place to investigate for signs of tampering or custom software. #G application formats.
Let's dig into common application data, like contacts and calendar entries. How are those stored, and crucially, can we recover them if they've been deleted?
iPods use standard file formats for these, which is helpful. Contact info was stored using the vCard format, .vcf, .vcard, the standard for electronic business cards. Calendar entries use the vCalendar calendar format, .ical.icalendar, based on RFC 2445. Beyond these, music and other files were stored in various locations determined by iTunes. Accessories or apps, either native or iPod Linux-based, also allowed for things like voice recordings, storing photos from digital cameras, even games, all potential sources of data. Now, crucially, from a forensic perspective, these vCard and iCalendar files can often be found easily by searching the raw data on the drive for specific text strings like begin.vcard and begin.vcalendar. What's even more important is that the data often remains after these entries are deleted. Only the file pointers are typically erased, leaving the underlying data intact until it's eventually overwritten.
This raises an important point again. Even if a user tries to delete something, the underlying data might still be there, just waiting for a skilled investigator to uncover it. This seems to be a recurring theme in digital forensics, isn't it? Delete rarely means gone.
It absolutely is. It's one of the first lessons. Deletion rarely means true erasure, especially on devices not designed for secure wiping. It's why imaging devices, before any further interaction, is so critical. Capture everything as it was. Hashtag H misuse of an iPod.
Given its pretty extensive storage capabilities, how might an iPod be misused? Or contain incriminating evidence beyond just innocent music files? It's almost unsettling how much data these devices hold, sometimes without the user even realizing it. I remember hearing a story, maybe apocryphal, about an investigator who recovered an entire criminal ledger hidden in obscure calendar entries on an iPod. Have you seen or heard of surprising ways these devices yielded crucial evidence?
That's a great example of how versatile these devices could be, yeah. Both innocently and maliciously. Like any digital storage, an iPod could absolutely hold incriminating evidence. Calendar entries might relate directly to a crime. Contact info could be highly relevant, given they could make voice recordings, conversations could be recovered. Couple that with photos or other data, an iPod could be a very rich source. Beyond direct criminal evidence, with their large hard drives, they were ideal for storing copyright-violating music, and especially newer ones with video photo support, illegal content like pornographic pictures. As for surprising finds, the one that always sticks with me is when investigators found encrypted files on an iPod disguised as music files. Turned out to be a dead drop for corporate espionage. The songs were just containers for sensitive documents. It's a constant reminder. Never assume anything about a device's true purpose or contents. Hashtag iPod investigation.
Okay, so if an iPod is found at a crime scene, what's the very first thing a first responder should do? And what precautions are paramount to preserve that potential evidence?
The very first step for a first responder is, ideally, to wait for the advice of a forensic specialist. This is essential to ensure the scene is documented correctly. You should either explicitly document the iPod's location and surroundings, or, preferably, photograph the entire site from multiple angles, showing the iPod in context. The single most important precaution is to leave the device in its current state until an expert can handle it. Don't touch it, don't turn it on or off.
Why is leaving it alone so critical?
Well, there's a serious warning here. iPods can be booby-trapped with delete commands or wipe functions. This is particularly relevant with iPod Linux, where custom tools could be set to wipe the drive if disconnected from a charger or computer without a special guide, like a digital self-destruct.
Okay, so touching it could trigger something nasty. What if it's connected to a computer?
Yep. Right. If found in a connected state, showing do not disconnect, note if it's currently mounted by the host system. It's crucial to safely unmount the device before disconnecting. On a Mac, drag the icon to the trash. On Windows, use the unplug or eject hardware icon. Simply unplugging without unmounting could damage disk sectors, making recovery harder. Always note the iPod's name displayed on the desktop before unmounting.
And for collection.
Collection? Always specify and collect all connections, cabling, and details of the machine it was connected to. Store the iPod like any hard drive. Antistatic bag, controlled temperature humidity, away from vibration or strong magnets. Maintain a strong chain of custody log everyone who handles it. Unlike some embedded devices, iPods do not need continuous power and storage. Data isn't typically lost if the battery drains, which simplifies long-term evidence storage. For hard drive models, it's often more effective to extract the hard drive for analysis. This allows using an external hardware write blocker, but this requires high technical skill and specialized hardware to avoid damage.
That makes sense. Anything else useful?
Yeah, an interesting artifact. An iPod stores the name of the computer it was initially synced with. This can help link the device to other computers and suspects. And while imaging is always first, you can often determine the drive format, FAT32 or HFS+, directly from the iPod itself via settings about. #J timeline generation.
One of the most valuable things an investigator can do is build a timeline of events. How can an iPod, which seems mostly about media playback, help reconstruct a sequence of events?
The iPod's design inherently helps with timelines precisely because it's typically linked to only one system at a time. This allows establishing likely connection times to a specific computer. Crucially, the times associated with these connection events reflect the system time of the linked host computer, not the iPod's own internal clock. That distinction is vital for accurate correlation.
So the iPod's timestamps match the computer it was plugged into.
Generally, yes, for connection and file transfer events. Several key files on the iPod provide specific timestamps. iPod control devices info. Its modified time often records when the iPod was last restored or updated. iPod control. Its creation time records when it was first initialized using iTunes on a host. iPod control tunes device info. Its modified time records the last connection to iTunes. Music files under iPod control music. Their creation times record when they were copied from the host. Modification times can provide further links, especially to Windows systems. By carefully correlating these times with events on the host computer, if you have access to its logs or registry, investigators can construct a detailed picture of the device's usage history. It provides invaluable context. #KLab analysis.
Once we have the iPod secured and brought safely back to the lab, what specialized tools are used for that deep analysis? And what are the absolute best practices for handling the device at this stage?
In the lab, a variety of robust forensic tools come into play. Industry standards like Access Data's Forensic Toolkit, FTK, the open source Sleuthkit Autopsy browser, Black Bag Technologies Macintosh Forensic Software, MFS, EnCase Forensic Edition. It's critical, though, to match the tool to the device's environment. MFS is for Mac environments. Sleuthkit Autopsy might need special handling for the Apple file system, HFS+, and you need the right FireWire or USB connectors ready, depending on the model.
And how do you handle the device itself?
Ideally, the forensic analyst will disassemble the iPod and remove the hard drive for analysis. This is generally best practice.
Why remove the drive?
Because it allows using a hardware write blocker. That's a physical device sitting between the evidence drive and your workstation, physically preventing any alteration. It protects against those booby traps we talked about, like a wipe program set to run on boot up via iPod Linux. You avoid triggering it.
Okay, disassembly is preferred. What if that's not practical, like with flash memory nanos?
Right. If disassembly isn't practical, or if you're working on an assembled device after imaging and reassembly, certain steps are recommended. 1. Ensure the battery is fully charged. Don't want it dying mid-analysis. 2. Carefully turn on the iPod. 3. Note and meticulously document all device settings visible on screen. 4. Subsequent steps then differ based on whether it was a Windows or Mac host originally, guiding your software tool choice. And here's that crucial warning again, worth repeating. The iPod is in effect an external storage device. Everything that applies to the forensic analysis of a hard drive also applies to an iPod. Treat it with the same rigor. It's serious evidence regardless of its primary function. #cell_tell the iPod restore process.
That's a great warning. Really solidifies how we should view these as full-fledged storage. But let's tackle a common misconception. If someone restores their iPod, maybe thinking they're wiping it clean, does that mean all the data is gone forever?
Absolutely not. It's a very common misconception, but the source is clear. The iPod restore process does not clear the hard drive. When you restore an iPod, it essentially copies new data onto it, making it appear erased and reloaded with a fresh OS. But in reality, only the file pointers, the markers telling the OS where files begin and end, are typically erased. Unless that specific underlying data was subsequently overwritten during the restore or by new files later, it's still physically present on the drive and recoverable by a skilled analyst.
So the data is still there, just hidden.
Pretty much, yeah. The process generally involves connecting an unformatted, corrupted HFS plus iPod to Windows driver's load. The iPod updated prompts for format. Restore triggers rewriting partition tables, creating new system and data partitions, FAT32, creating key directories, iPod control device, and binary files. After power reconnect and OS reload, connect to host iTunes loads, set up assistant prompts for a name stored in device info along with user computer name. iTunes creates its control directory, iTunes, and music folders, music to F4 to 9.
Wow, that's an incredibly detailed breakdown. So the bottom line for an investigator is, even if a user tries to restore their iPod, thinking they've wiped it, what they've really done is just reshuffle the deck, and most of those cards are still there, waiting for you to find them.
Exactly. It's a classic forensic principle. Delete rarely means gone. The restore just creates a new surface, but underneath, much of the old data often remains, just unreferenced. And crucially, that restore process itself leaves a fantastic breadcrumb trail of timestamps and logs on both the iPod and the host system, which is invaluable for building that timeline. Hashtag, tag, EnCase in the iPod.
For our listeners who might be familiar with or using a powerful forensic suite like EnCase, how will they specifically approach acquiring data from an iPod? And what are the key precautions?
Right, using EnCase. The primary goal is always a forensically sound image without altering the original evidence. First step, configure your forensic workstation, especially if it's Windows, into read-only mode to prevent accidental writes. This often involves a specific registry key adjustment, like setting HKey local machine system current control storage device policies to 0x0000000001 and restarting. Ideally, though, you'd use a hardware write blocker. That's the gold standard.
Write blocker is best, but registry change helps.
Correct. Once that read-only environment is confirmed, EnCase's acquisition features let you connect the iPod and capture that bit-for-bit image of its entire drive. Then you can analyze that image using EnCase's full suite of tools for carving data, searching, timeline creation, and so on. Hashtag #N, the iPod and Windows.
What kinds of breadcrumbs does an iPod leave behind in a Windows system's registry or log files? These hidden artifacts on the host computer can often be just as telling as the data on the device itself, right?
You're absolutely right. The Windows OS leaves behind significant forensic information, especially in the registry and log files, that can directly link an iPod to a specific computer. Our main concerns are the registry keys created when an iPod connects, and the last write times for changes to those keys. When an iPod connects to Windows, it creates keys under HKey local machine system current control set enum ukaso store. In there, you'll find a key identifying a disk device with vendor, Apple, product iPod, and a revision code. This helps match host to iPod. The last write time for this specific key indicates the first time that iPod connected to that Windows host.
First connection time. Interesting.
Yeah, and further down, there's a subkey named after the iPod's unique USB serial number, often ending in N0. This value matches the FireWire grid found in the iPod control device's Sympho file on the iPod itself. The last write time associated with this subkey tells us the last time the iPod connected to that Windows host.
First and last connection times, potentially.
Potentially, yes. And there's that vital warning again. Remember that the iPod does not update file times, and that these will reflect the create and modify timestamps of the computer to which the iPod is paired. Key for interpreting timestamps correctly. Beyond the registry, the set2poppy.log file in the Windows install directory records all driver installations after boot. The first time an iPod connects, this event is meticulously logged here. The info often matches the registry key last write times. This log is incredibly useful for reconstructing the sequence of connection events for the iPod and the host, showing when drivers were installed and configured. It provides a crucial way to reconstruct events and definitively link a specific iPod to a specific computer at a specific time.
This offers a fantastic example of how connecting the dots between multiple sources, the device itself, the host computer's registry, its system logs, creates that complete and compelling picture for the investigation. It's never just about one piece of the puzzle, is it? Hashtag #O. The iPod and Linux. What if an iPod was connected to a Linux machine? How would an investigator approach acquiring an image in that environment? Perhaps using command line tools.
In a Linux environment, like Ubuntu maybe, the procedure involves a few specific steps. First, you'd want to disable auto-mounting of removable media in system preferences. Prevents the OS altering the device automatically. Then, you locate the iPod in the Linux device tree. Open a terminal, type ls devs before connecting, connect it, wait maybe 20 seconds, type ls devs again. The new listings belong to the iPod, FreeAG, devs, db. Once identified, you'd ideally mount it in read-only mode or, more likely for imaging, use a command like dd directly on the device identifier, ensuring no data is written. It's also important to note, the Apple file system HFS Plus is required to be loaded into the Linux kernel in order to mount an iPod initialized using a Mac. So if it's a Mac-formatted iPod, your Linux system needs the right kernel modules like HS++ loaded to read it. Hashtag PT user accounts.
Can we find out who owned or initially set up the iPod? Identify the user account associated with it?
Yes, definitely possible and often a crucial piece. When an iPod is set up using iTunes, a specific file, iPod control tunes, where E is a variable 2-character hex identifier, gets created. This file contains valuable info, including the username and computer information used during that setup. This data can directly identify the user and the specific computer that initialized the iPod. If, however, this file just contains the word IPO, it usually indicates the software was restored without ever connecting to iTunes afterwards, so that specific user linkage won't be present in that file. ###Q, deleted files.
We discussed earlier that restoring an iPod doesn't really erase data. What about just deleting individual files through the normal interface? Does that make the data unrecoverable?
Much like the restore process, when you delete files normally on an iPod, it primarily deletes the file pointers, not the actual data itself. The OS just marks that space as available, but the old data remains until it's overwritten. Combine this with the iPod sequential writing, that wear leveling we talked about, and the recovery of deleted files on an iPod can actually be a relatively simple process for a forensic analyst. The data often remains physically present, just unreferenced, making it ripe for recovery tools. #our iPod time issues.
Time is absolutely critical in any forensic analysis. How does the iPod handle timestamps? And are there any quirks we need to be aware of when trying to establish an accurate timeline?
This is a nuanced area, yeah, and very important for accurate timeline reconstruction. The iPod does have an internal clock, but unfortunately, the standard embedded operating system does not update file times.
So the timestamps on files don't change when you access them on the iPod.
Not with the native OS, no. This means the creation and modification times you see on files within a native iPod will not reflect the iPod's internal clock or when the file was truly accessed on the device. However, there's a key distinction. If iPod Linux is involved, its system clock does update file access times. So, native OS timestamps reflect connecting computer time. Alternative OS like iPod Linux internal clock might be used. This leads to another critical warning from the source. It is important to remember that the file create and modify times as they appear on the iPod reflect the timestamp associated with the paired computer. This can be useful in proving that a particular iPod was connected to a host machine.
So it's a double-edged sword. Doesn't give device-specific timestamps, but strongly ties it to a host's timeline.
Exactly. It confirms connection events and transfers based on the host's clock. #S registry key containing the iPod's USB FireWire serial number.
Let's just quickly tie back to the registry information we discussed. Where exactly do we find the iPod's unique identifiers, like its USB or FireWire serial number, in those Windows artifacts? Just be crystal clear.
Right, connecting those pieces. 2 files on the iPod are key here. iPod control device sysinfo, created during Restorin, has hardware info including the serial GID, and iPod control tunes device info, created after iTunes link, stores user computer names. When iTunes runs on Windows and links to the iPod, it creates a record in the Windows registry and in the ses2puppy.log file. These entries contain a clear reference to that USB FireWire serial number, which comes directly from the sysinfo file on the iPod. This allows for a definitive, undeniable link between the physical iPod device and its host computer's activity logs and registry entries, providing concrete proof of connection. #T iPod tools.
Beyond the general imaging tools like EnCase or FTK, are there specialized products designed specifically for iPod data recovery that an investigator might find particularly useful?
Yes, while standard drive imaging tools are definitely applicable, several products were specifically designed with the iPod in mind, mainly due to its huge popularity and somewhat unique structure back then. These could streamline recovery sometimes. Disk Internal's music recovery. This was shareware designed to recover music files from HDDs, iPods, USB drives, CDs, DVDs, Windows only, but had native iPod support and integrated player for preview. Importantly, it could recover from damaged disk partitions and supported various file systems: NTFS, X23, HFS, ISO 9660, UDF, making it versatile. Recover My iPod from Get Data focused on recovering lost deleted music, video, photos.m4a, .mp3, .mov, JPEG, etc. Supported all iPod versions even after reset restore. Again, Windows only. It could connect directly to the physical drive if the iPod wasn't recognized, mounting it read only, though a hardware blocker is always better. Recover My Files, also Get Data, a more comprehensive tool from the same company for computer drives and iPods. Offered deep scan and fast search for more thorough recovery across more data types. #UDD and the iPod Linux imaging.
Okay, for our listeners working in a Linux environment, how would they use that powerful command line tool DD to image an iPod? Let's get practical here.
Absolutely. The DAD command is fundamental for bit-for-bit imaging in Linux, crucial for forensics. To image an iPod identified, say as devsda, the basic command would look like this: dd of devsda of EnCase bb1 iPod.image. Let's break that down. Their disk duplicator command itself, if desktop.if means input file. This is your source, the entire iPod drive. You'd substitute stoda with the actual device identifier you found, SDB, SDC, etc. You could specify a partition like stoda1 if needed, but usually you image the whole device. msdb1 iPod.image of devnean's output file. This is your destination, the image file. Replace msdb1 iPod.image with the path and file name where you want to save the evidence image, making sure you have enough space there. This command creates a precise byte-for-byte duplicate. Be warned, it can take a long time, and DevDay doesn't always give progress updates, so it might seem inactive. Patience is key. Once done, it's absolutely crucial to generate cryptographic checksums like MD5 or SHA-1 hashes for both the source drive and the created image file to verify integrity. Use MD5 sum devsta and MD5 sum msdb1 iPod.image, record the values. This proves your image is an exact, unaltered copy. Vital for court.
This really illustrates that hands-on command line approach sometimes needed in forensics, ensuring every bit is captured with integrity. It's powerful, but demands precision, doesn't it? Hashtag tag learning points and recap. Okay, wow, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from those early personal digital assistants through the business-centric Blackberries and into the seemingly innocent music-playing iPods. So what are the absolute critical takeaways for you, the listener, from this deep dive into mobile device forensics?
Well, first, I think we need to reiterate that while each device type has its unique characteristics and challenges, mobile device forensics shares many core principles with traditional computer forensics. Securing the evidence, creating exact bit-for-bit images, meticulous documentation, these are always paramount, regardless of the device.
The fundamentals still apply.
Exactly. However, we also highlighted the very distinct challenges posed by each device type. PDAs are mini-computers. Key issues were volatile data and needing to thoroughly search for diverse, often tiny memory cards that could hold huge amounts of evidence. Blackberries. Their always-on nature, that push technology, meant incoming data could constantly overwrite things. This mandated prioritizing volatile log files before imaging, a real departure from traditional methods in dealing with their strong native encryption. iPods. We saw their dual-role media player and storage device. The impact of the host OS on the file system, their specific timestamp behaviors reflecting the host, not the device, and potential booby traps with alternative OS like iPod Linux all require specific attention. I think the overarching theme is the critical importance of a meticulous, documented investigative process, from initial seizure right through to final reporting, including, of course, a strict chain of quality. We also touched on key tools and techniques: PDA Seizure, EnCase, Blackberry SDK, recovery software, using read-only mode or hardware write blockers, specific log collection methods, disassembling devices where appropriate. Ultimately, investigating these devices requires connecting the dots. Evidence often exists across multiple systems: the device, cradle, host computer, network logs. Piecing it together needs a holistic approach, a keen eye for detail, and a deep understanding of these unique technologies. Hashtag closing note.
This has been an incredibly detailed and enlightening deep dive. It really shows how every piece of technology, no matter how small or seemingly simple, can hold a wealth of information absolutely crucial to an investigation. It's quite a testament to the digital breadcrumbs we all leave behind, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as you've learned today, the principles, while demanding, are essential for ensuring justice in our digital age. I'd encourage you, the listener, to think critically about how rapidly evolving mobile technology will continue to present new forensic challenges and also new opportunities. So maybe a final thought for you to ponder. What does this all mean for the future of mobile device forensics? As these devices become even more integrated into every aspect of our lives, and their data gets even more distributed across cloud services, wearables, you name it, how will forensic investigators adapt to ensure no digital stone is left unturned?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into PDA, Blackberry, and iPod forensics. We look forward to exploring more fascinating topics with you in the next chapter of the EC Council CHFI 31249 certification.